This episode of the MultimediaJay Show is brought to you by Thunder Dude Baked Beans. Life is fun when you feel the thunder. And by Weblow Heating and Air, Jaytona's friendly neighborhood HVAC professionals. Weblow Heating and Air. Let's start the show.
Howdy, folks. Jason here, aka MultimediaJay.
What is up, everybody?
This is the MultimediaJay Show for July 7th, 2012. Today's show topic is, do game consoles have a future? And now, the man himself, MultimediaJay.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and why I just made a random reference to the late great Mr. Rogers, I have no clue. What is up, everybody? This is the MultimediaJay Show, and I hope you all had a safe and happy 4th of July holiday this past week. It's been a rocky couple of weeks for me, but here I am again doing this podcast for you folks. I was surprised folks actually liked the last one. I thought it was going to be like, too long! Why should we listen to you talk for close to an hour? Forget it! But, I mean, it's not unlike some talk radio. Here's the funny part. I listen to some talk radio around here, and some of these folks that are doing, shows every single day, how in the world do people listen to these people? They sound like they're about to fall asleep. There's this one guy on this Rhode Island station I listen to. He sounds like he's barely staying awake while he does his show. He's like, please. The overnight trucker show that I listen to on the way home from my new second shift job sounds more interesting than this robot. Anyways, we'll leave all to the people that actually do that stuff. We're not here to be like that. We're here to be entertaining and edgy. And what's his we? It's just me sitting here with this microphone. I don't know. I'm just too used to being a team player at various jobs I've had and stuff like that. I don't stop enough. Yeah, some opening monologue this turned out to be. Anyways. Today's topic is, do game consoles have a future? Very, very edgy and controversial, and it'll make for some very interesting discussions, both on this show and the next time I'm on Out of Continues with fellow YouTuber Staffa X. I'm hoping that the monologue on the show today will serve as a great primer for the discussion in case he's got any ideas about this. And you know how it goes. Sometimes monologue shows where it's just one person talking, the dynamics of it are very different from shows where there's 2 or 3 people discussing something. Monologue shows and discussion shows can sometimes take the very same idea and just talk about it in 2 completely different ways. The only thing I want to say right now is, if Mr. Staffa happens to be listening to this and wants to leave a comment on this when it's on YouTube, don't spoil too much of the show, man. We gotta, whatever you want to talk about, save it for the show. Let's not go spoiling everything in YouTube comments, because this will be a very interesting discussion. But yeah, do game consoles have a future is coming up after the news commentary in this podcast here. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I really think that the era of console gaming, especially with developments on other platforms over the last year or two, I seriously think that everybody's going nuts about the Wii U. They're like, oh, Nintendo's the next Sega. They're going to have to leave the hardware industry and just do software from here on out. And they're like, Nintendo, this might be their last console. Are they going to survive? Can they keep competing? Well, here's the thing. I think people that say that are short-sighted. They need to be looking at the PlayStations and Xboxes too, because things aren't that much rosier for the next PlayStation or Xbox either. We'll get into that into today's discussion about whether or not game consoles have a future, and in the upcoming, no doubt, discussion on Out of Continues sometime in the next several weeks. Mr. Staffa mentioned me that he's going on vacation, so he's actually putting together a bunch of shows this weekend to post while he's out having probably a well-deserved rest from his gaming podcast. And then when he gets back, probably the next time I'm on that show, this is going to be the topic of discussion, and we'll see what comes up as we discuss this whole thing. But yeah, do game consoles have a future? Very interesting topic. It may tick some people off, but why don't you just at least have a listen to some of the stuff that I'll be talking about when we get to that. In any event, let's not drag out the opening monologue any more than we absolutely have to. Let's get straight to some news. First off, some continuing coverage of the Microsoft Surface tablet developments. Now, last time I made fun of the Microsoft Surface. It's the source of quite a few geek jokes and all that other fun stuff. But let's be a bit more serious now. I don't think the Surface is doomed from the start. I think the Surface is walking a fine line. It could either really, really succeed, or it could really, really fail. And the jury is still out on whether it's going to really, really succeed or fail. But whatever it does, it's going to do a lot. Now, last time I was just making fun of the thing goes, we can make lots of bad jokes like a new Microsoft product has surfaced, and things like that. But let's look at the seriousness of this deal here. What has Microsoft traditionally been good at? Even if they aren't the most innovative company out there, they are very good at getting existing technologies to appeal to business users. So I'm very interested in the possibility that business computing could have a whole new form factor when the Surface launches. If the Surface is more business friendly than the current tablet offerings out there in terms of being a proper hybrid or crossover between an iPad and a more traditional business computer, this thing will sell all over the place. It could be one of the most successful Microsoft products ever. Even if corporate IT folks who aren't really all that enthused about Windows 8 downgrade the thing to Windows 7. If that's possible on the Surface, if that's possible on the Microsoft Surface, that'll be very interesting. Anyways, the way that the Surface has been getting in the news in the past few weeks since our last show has been something that I completely and totally forgot about when I was cracking all my bad jokes about Surface and it being a Microsoft computer and stuff like that. One very important thing that's been landing them in the news is the fact that by making hardware, Microsoft is basically bypassing a lot of their previous business partners. Previously, they would make like some version of Windows, and then the computer OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, for those of you that aren't all that big on that kind of lingo, the computer OEMs would manufacture the hardware for them. But now that Microsoft's making hardware, they're practically bypassing everybody they used to do business with. And computer OEMs aren't exactly having a very good time these days with all this post-PC stuff going on and all these other types of devices that people can use as computers. Still not a big fan of the whole post-PC thing, but just for the heck of it, I might use the term from time to time. But all these other alternative computing devices, that's better. All these other alternative computing devices are making things crazy for computer manufacturers. We mentioned the last time that computer manufacturers are mostly doing other stuff these days because there's no money left in traditional computers. But HP and Dell and the rest of them, there's quite a few news articles about how all these OEMs are like, whoa, what's going on here? Some are even saying that Microsoft has pretty much snubbed that industry by making hardware and whatnot. But too many stories to link. Just type in Microsoft Surface. It's probably one of the more recent. If you do the Google News search with it, it's probably one of the more prevalent topics in the last couple of weeks. But this will be very interesting to keep an eye on because by making hardware, Microsoft is basically bypassing a lot of companies that they previously might have done business with. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the Surface because of that. Now, out of the news this week, not very good, unfortunately. The June Economic Report and Jobs Report was released, delayed a bit by the 4th of July holiday, but unfortunately depressing. As the charts on the St. Louis Federal Reserve site that I linked to and that you can easily access by going to my link list on my blog, multimediajay.wordpress.com, and then I'll post a link in the video description, multimediajay.wordpress.com. Click in that big list of topics going down the left side of the blog site. Click Great Recession. This is probably going to be the only entry for a long, long time because I deliberately put that post category in there so that anyone visiting could have easy access to the charts I brought up in that radio style segment that I did a while back about the state of the economy. I am a numbers person. My background is in business. My background's in business. I've worked in large businesses that are basically giant number machines. And so I want to get down to, and my roots are in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, namely electronics, which of course has a lot of physics in it, which of course has a lot of math in it. So I've never been the kind of person who's afraid of working with hard numbers on things, and this economy is no exception to that. The economy, we got politicians out there saying that there's a recovery going on because they're trying to get their person elected, but I'll skip all the C-SPAN speeches and get straight to the hard numbers, like what these charts are that are tracked by the St. Louis Federal Reserve based on data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Basically, the June jobs report, more of the same, assorted nonsense, and a snoozy economy. And I'll let the one chart that I will directly link, though, is percentage of unemployed who are unemployed 27 weeks and longer. Long-term unemployment is still at an all-time high, and the numbers for June barely moved from the mess they've been in since this mess has been going on. Now, I'll let that long-term unemployed chart basically tell the whole story. It's at an all-time high. The all-time high that it's at is like a giant cliff overlooking a valley if you look at the chart. And it just speaks for itself. Until that number plummets, I don't just mean little itty-bitty improvements, I mean serious improvements, then don't expect things to get better anytime soon. And all this nonsense you might hear from people about how there's supposedly a recovery going on is just political nonsense. Quite frankly, I'm sick of it. I think this is probably going to be the most useless presidential election that I've ever seen. I mean, wow, choose your pick, America. Snob number 1 or snob number 2. You know, there's a lot of talk about Washington and government being too different from business. And some people say that if we had people in office who knew more about running businesses, things would be better. Well, here's my answer to that. If we're going to bring over anything from the business world into how to run this country, here's what we need to bring over: metrics, best practices, and working with numbers. So no matter what somebody with a large toothy grin says on C-SPAN, we need to look at the hard numbers to hold these people accountable. And there's talk about the economy now because it's an election year, but in the grand scheme of things, it's too little too late. Just look at the charts, look at the numbers, look at all those BLS and St. Louis Fred charts where these numbers are miserable and barely move anywhere, if they move at all, in either direction. And all the nonsense will just go completely out the door because, unless you cook the numbers, you really can't get past them. So enough with the subjective speeches and I like this guy better than that guy. We need to stick to what's objective and we need to stick to the hard numbers. And so that's why this June economic report is a loud and clear signal to me that things are basically going nowhere and don't expect any changes anytime soon, which is bad because, how many more people do we need to have going through life feeling like they've done nothing wrong? They've done everything everybody told them to do. They're hardworking people. It's just pure circumstance that we have the worst economy since the Great Depression, college-educated baristas, janitors with PhDs, and the entire higher education system getting into more of a change or die type situation because of the way things are. I mean, what's the point of going to college at this point? All it's going to do is be a liability rather than an asset. You'll go and you'll get your education, your degree, and a decent amount of student loan debt, and then what? All you can do is get jobs you could have had straight out of high school, and now you're worse off because the student loan payment means your crappy paying job now pays you even less. I recently started a second shift warehouse job, and I'm working with a bunch of people who are victims of the Great Recession that came in from other businesses, things that they could make more money at, things they could enjoy, things they enjoyed more, and things like that. And they all have the same attitude, like, I just worked hard and paid the bills and contributed to society, and I wound up here. Little wonder that the American people are so cynical when this is the kind of reality that they have to face these days. That you can do everything the way everybody wants you to do. You can do things totally right, good, honest progress, and then wind up here like everybody else. It's disgusting. And worse than that would have to be some of the politicians I've been seeing on some of these C-SPAN, CNN, etc. These people that are actually saying bad things about the American people being so cynical. Oh, we've got to move past our cynicism. Here's the problem. What is the root cause of the cynicism? Nobody has any freaking money, and nobody seems to give a darn about the fact that so many people did all the right things and wound up flat on their face. Don't go pointing fingers at people who did what they were supposed to do and then wound up in this situation anyways. How dare anybody do that, accusing people of anything, when the fact remains the economy is just in the dumps? That should be a reason to vote for their opponent. Right there. That should lose votes for these people. But sadly, I know of some folks just so dedicated to whoever they like the most that they could blame them for their sad state. Oh, the politician could blame them for their sad state all they want, and they still wouldn't change anything when they went to the polls. It's pretty sad and it's pretty depressing. And very much in line with the response to that June jobs report as well. But yeah, that needs to stop. This pointing fingers at the American people saying, oh, you need to quit being so cynical. Yeah? Well, here's an idea. People will stop being cynical when there's nothing left of this nonsense to be cynical about. Bring back the American dream, or else shut up and deal with the cynicism. Okay. I think that's enough news commentary for now. When we come back, this is going to be interesting. Maybe the news commentary's just gotten edgier than the topic in the discussion. When we come back, do game consoles have a future? Stay tuned, everybody. This is the MultimediaJay Show.
MultimediaJay.
Hey, what's up, listeners? This is MultimediaJay here. Now, the summer's off to a hot start so far, and there's this joke going around the radio world that goes something like this. Hey, man, your wife is hot. Yeah, I know. The air conditioning broke and we gotta get it fixed. Well, if that is anything more than merely a joke to you, then you don't have to roast. Call the fine folks over at Weblow Heating and Air at 555-4WEBLOW. That's 555-4WEBLOW. They're Daytona's friendly hometown HVAC professionals. And when everything cools off and winter rolls around, hey, they'll do heating stuff too. That's Weblow Heating and Air, Daytona's friendly hometown HVAC professionals. 555-4WEBLOW, 555-4WEBLOW. If being hot means anything other than being good looking this summer for you, no need to roast. Say hello to the fine folks at Weblow. Weblow Heating and Air.
Summer's heating up. Why can't your baked beans heat up with it? Well, now they can. New from the makers of Thunder Dude Baked Beans. It's Thunder Dude Baked Beans Inferno! All the big, bold taste and nutritional benefits of baked beans, plus heat, and more heat, as much as your tongue can possibly take. Choose from one of 3 different levels of heat intensity. Hot, very hot, and oh my god, call the fire department, my tongue's on fire. If you love baked beans and love hot, spicy food, you will love Thunder Dude Baked Beans Inferno. Try it today, if you dare. Thunder Dude Baked Beans. Life is fun when you feel the thunder. This is the MultimediaJay Show. And now, the man himself, MultimediaJay.
Okay. This might be a little difficult. It might be hard to top the edginess of that news commentary segment, but let's give it a shot, shall we? Do game consoles have a future? Here comes the hate mail. Here come the fanboy comments. Here come, PC gamer, you. Why don't you try listening to what I have to say before you go jumping to conclusions about this topic? Because I would have laughed at this topic a couple of years ago, but now it's gotten quite relevant and is very much worth discussing. Not to beat around the bush, let's get straight to what we're going to talk about here. This whole story begins with something that happened to me this week. Earlier in the week, I made that video about frustrations that I've been having with gaming in general. How I buy lots of games but don't really beat a lot of games, or sometimes I don't even play through them very much, and before getting bored with them. I've just been frustrated all over the place. Another major source of frustration has been whether or not I should get a PS3, because there are some games that I want to play that I need a PS3 for, but should I get it just for that? Should I get it even though I want to download most of the games that I play on it? Should I even bother? Well, finally I just decide, you know what? Money's going to be terrible no matter what I do, so let's just take the hit and get a PS3 and see what happens out. So I did. I got a PS3, I got a Ratchet & Clank game, and Gran Turismo 5, which was a game I've been looking forward to for a long time, but it was stuck in that preview mode for however long it was. And I didn't really feel like paying for a demo, so to speak, which is pretty much what I viewed the Gran Turismo 5 preview edition as. So I waited until the full version was out. Now it's here, so I picked that up. Got Beyond Good and Evil HD downloaded off of the PlayStation Network, and the big reason and the saving grace of this console, even if it turns out to not be all that interesting for me, is that it is the PlayStation Network and being able to download a lot of classic PS1 games that I never got to play during their heyday that might be a little expensive now if they're only available at collector prices, like Final Fantasy VII. I got the PC version of that, but it's not going to work very well in a Windows 7 environment. Plus, it's not going to be faithful to the original experience on the PlayStation. There's some other games like Legend of Mana and Chrono Cross that I never got to play during their heyday that, I just get them off the PlayStation Network and not have to worry about hunting down old copies of the discs and old PS1 memory cards to use at my PlayStation 2. So, I can find some utility from this, but my initial experience with the PlayStation 3 has been massive disappointment. I mean, so far my experience is basically, it's like being a PC gamer, but worse. Is this really what it means to have a console these days? No, I didn't get to finish my thought at the start of the show, where I just kept going on into this, that, and the other as things came to my head. But here's the thing: I think the days of console gaming are coming to a close. I really think, people are concerned about whether Nintendo can survive with the Wii U, or whether the 3DS is going to be able to amount to anything against smartphones. They're short-sighted. They should be looking at all dedicated gaming devices, because the castle is under siege, folks. The barbarians are banging at the gates. And it's not just Nintendo that's in this boat. I can very easily imagine the next PlayStation, the next Xbox being in this very same boat. Hence the discussion today, do game consoles have a future? Because the experience I'm having with the PlayStation 3 so far is that it's like being a PC gamer, but worse. Installs take longer. I mean, I came in from my second shift job at 3 o'clock in the morning, half asleep already. And I was like, you know what? Let's try to stay up and play some PS3 before I call it a night. I never played any PS3. It started it up, big system download, another big download. I went to install Gran Turismo, another huge download. It probably took about 2.5 hours just to finally get to where I could play Gran Turismo. And then, another update. I install Ratchet and Clank. Wait. You got to update it. I tried the Tetris demo, right? There's a version of Tetris on the PlayStation Network. It's supposed to be new. I download it. It's like 50, 60 something megs. Oops. It's got to be updated to the latest version. Download a 50 something meg patch. I just download it. Why can't I just download the current version of the game from the PlayStation Network? How come I gotta download the first version and then the update before playing a freaking demo of Tetris? Is this what it means to be a console gamer these days? If it is, you can have it. Steam is way better than this. And I'm really starting to like Steam. You know, I used to hate the fact that Skyrim forced you to install Steam. Now, I may stop buying a lot of physical copies of games with the endless Steam sales. And, you know, you just download it and it works and all that other fun stuff. All of this frustration, you know, to deal with my gaming frustration has made it such that, you know, we got to talk about this. So here it is. It sounds crazy that, you know, we could be asking, does console gaming have any kind of future? But so did the idea that video games would be what they are today, back when the industry was burnt out on the idea of video games after the infamous 1983 crash. Yeah, history lesson for your youngins in the audience. The Nintendo Entertainment System was called an entertainment system because if Nintendo had said anything whatsoever about it being video game back after that crash, nobody would have wanted to sell the thing because everybody was burnt out on video games after the crash of 83. You know, there was talk that video games were just a passing fad that would be associated with the 70s and the very beginning of the 80s, that it just came and went. Well, wow, times have changed. Then again, people used to always say that video games would rot your brain too, but I think time has proven them wrong. But, you know, it sounds crazy that, you know, we could be talking about the end of the console gaming days, but so did the idea of video games even amounting to anything after the crash nearly killed everything off. Anyways, an article that we're going to be referencing for this from a site I probably shouldn't use because of my previous appearance on Out of Continues. The site's called Attack of the Fanboy. There was an article that was posted earlier about the CEO of Crytek, the folks who make the engine that the Crysis games run on. He sees the future of consoles as free to play. And in that article, I'll post a link to it in the description, of course. But in that article, the CEO, Savat Yearly, I think, I hope I didn't mess the name up too much. CEO Yearly basically says, I firmly believe that the next generation of tablets are going to be close to current generation consoles. So if the next generation consoles don't ship very soon, the tablets are just going to run over them. I've believed for about a year now that as soon as tablets can stream to TVs, that there's no reason why you should buy a console anymore. I don't think he's entirely right. I don't think this CEO is entirely right about tablets catching up to consoles that quickly, because there's a bit of a problem with hot potato tablets right now. The latest iPad had this problem. You know, if the thing cranked way up doing some heavy duty multimedia stuff, the thing could actually get a little uncomfortable to hold because of how hot it got. Laptops are the same way. Laptops haven't been able to be laptops like the name suggests for quite some time, because if the processor is too fast, if you're really using this thing, it's, you know, balancing it on your thigh or putting it in your lap or something like that, then it's going to get a little uncomfortable. And last time I read, there's an article in The Consumerist, actually, that I'll link to as well. But last time I read about this whole hot potato thing, you know, I guess doctors are saying you shouldn't use things that are uncomfortably hot to hold for a long period of time, because repeated exposure to stuff that's uncomfortably warm, even without being like too hot, can still cause issues like toasted skin syndrome or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'll post a link to this article in the video description, on YouTube for you folks to look up. But basically, yeah, until we get around this wall, you know, tablets, I guess, might have some issues with getting up to speed with the consoles. When it happens, though, tablets serving as consoles, I don't doubt, will put a big dent in the console market. Because when you've got a device that can be a video game console and something else, what's the point of buying the next PlayStation or something like that? And where's the product differentiation? You know, where's the product differentiation? I mean, the Wii has a lot of decent first-party software, like all the Mario games and stuff like that, and it did a pretty decent job with some motion controls with casual games like Wii Sports and things like that. But as a piece of hardware, yeah, it is kind of behind everything else. But look at how the PlayStation 3 was marketed. An everything device. Ooh, it plays games, it plays Blu-rays, it does this, it does that. Yeah, well, guess what? What else can also do that for a few $100? A home theater PC. Where's the product differentiation that assumes that these products remain hot sellers? They're getting close enough to computers, and PCs need something to do when all these tablets are out doing, and there's tablets and all that other stuff. What happens when the product differentiation goes away? You know, and you start getting to where these devices get close enough together that they can start taking over each other's roles. So the tablet thing, where tablets could be the consoles of the future, I definitely keep an eye on. But what's in play here, are the fundamental mechanics of how game consoles stay on the market in the first place. Game consoles are only still around for two reasons: their price and their simplicity. And in both cases, the barbarians are banging on the gates of the castle at both of those things. Now, a console, and I talk a lot about PC gaming being expensive, and it's true. PC gaming is the most expensive. If you want to be a hardcore PC gamer and run all the hottest new releases with the settings maxed out right from the beginning and get the absolute best experience, you're going to be building one of those really awesome Core i7 machines where you spend $500 just on the processor. Never mind the video cards and the other guts of the system, or the case or the cooling. Even bang for buck systems like the Phenom 2 based system that I use as my main system for both gaming, video editing, and other multimedia type stuff. Even systems like that, even bang for buck systems, would still be a tad more expensive than console gaming at this point. To the extent that I can't recommend anybody be a PC gamer unless they have something to do with the PC when they're not playing games, because otherwise it'll just cost more, you know. But so down at the bottom of the barrel as far as cost goes, an inexpensive way to game is to just get a console. You can spend $250 on a PlayStation 3, $200 on an Xbox 360, or you can spend more for a gaming PC. I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, PC gaming, even though it's my preferred platform these days, is basically the most cost-ineffective way to game on the planet. And, well, you have to buy a controller afterwards, too. It's another $30. You really need to be willing to take the hit money-wise to build and maintain a decent gaming PC, and you definitely need money to burn if you want to be top of the line all the time with all the price skimming that goes on with computer parts. So I can't recommend anyone really be a hardcore PC gamer unless they have use for the PC outside of gaming. Now, I use a bang for buck system, but anybody who wants to max the settings out on hot new releases, they need to have money. And so for the rest of us, there's consoles. So here's the issue here. Consoles provide a cheap way to get a decent gaming machine to play video games on. Now, because of that niche, because it's, every console is basically a budget gaming PC, because I mean, where else are you going to get a gaming PC for $200? I'm not talking, a lot of the homebrew computer builders on here are probably like, oh, I can do that. No, I'm talking like if you have nothing, not if you have an old computer that you can just swap parts in. I mean, starting from scratch. Where else can you get into gaming for like $200 or less? So because of this niche that the consoles are filling, they essentially have a soft price cap where if the consoles cost too much, sales drop off because people won't want to spend that much money on a device that's used just for gaming. There's a whole issue of consumers and utility here that has to be addressed. Historically, this has been true as well. I mean, the most expensive consoles, when they release, are often the ones that don't do all that well. I actually did some research on this a while back when the PS3 first launched, and it stumbled out of the gate when it was one of the most expensive console, when it was at launch of all time. And I actually did some research on that several years ago, and the highest console launch prices of all time are held by the Philips CDI and the 3DO, both of which bombed, of course. Next up is the Neo Geo, which of course has always been an enthusiast product because it was 24-bit during the 16-bit days, had some arcade ports and things like that. So it kind of did its own thing during the days of the 16-bit wars. And then of course you had the PS3, which we know stumbled out of the gate versus the Xbox 360. Lack of software, several $100s, Blu-ray wasn't what it is today. It was like a Greyhound bus at a NASCAR race. Eventually it got going, but it was slow to start. And in today's generation of consoles, the PS3 is still the highest on the list in terms of buying stuff, with the 360 in the middle and the surprise success Wii notably lower on the price charts. That's probably been one thing that's helped the Wii out quite a bit. Plus the fact that the Wii is more focused on gaming, whereas the 360 and the PS3 are kind of more general, have been marketed as more general purpose devices. I really like that even though the Wii doesn't look as good, I can just put the disc in and start playing most Wii games that I've gotten. I haven't had to wait like a half hour to download huge patches on every single game that I purchased. So, anyways, last generation, of course, Xbox and PS2 were neck and neck. They were about the same, while the GameCube was notably lower. In the 90s, the Sega Saturn beat out the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64 by a wide margin when it came to launch price. We know how that turned out. For the most part, though, many classic consoles now that I've been around have released around $200 for their price at launch, while some more recent consoles that did well have been able to get away with being around the $300 mark. But anything higher, forget it. Except the Xbox 360, of course, but which was blown away price-wise by the PS3 at launch. But here's the thing I like to say. Here's a point that I like to make with situations like this. When a product does well because another product is terrible, that shouldn't be considered progress. It's just the lesser of two evils. So two expensive consoles, one is just notably less too expensive than the super duper expensive one. Yeah, I wouldn't exactly call that anything good. I just call it the lesser of two evils, and a sad side effect of a lack of competition in the market. So here's the thing, we did have the thing with the Xbox 360 and the PS3. What's the big difference this time? When those consoles released, we didn't have tablets looming on the horizon being the handy-dandy, portable, all-in-one devices that they're often marketed as today. We didn't have people playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City, recent-gen PS2 game, folks, on an iPad. We didn't have all this other stuff going on. So here's the question. What happens when that soft price cap starts being brought downward by alternative devices that become more viable at doubling as gaming devices? So what happens when you can buy a tablet with as much punch as a PS3, with graphics as good as a PS3 and performance as good as a PS3, and then just plug it into your television? What do you do? And then what happens when the next generation comes out that's on par with the next gen consoles? What do you do with that kind of stuff? So, the barbarians are banging on the castle doors with price, and I think they're banging on the doors with simplicity as well. One of the issues with PC gaming is it's a tad more complicated to deal with manual patches and Windows operating systems and things like that. But some of these, first of which, Steam has done a lot to simplify PC gaming quite a bit, where you can just download it and then Steam does the rest in terms of keeping it up to date, installing it somewhere, and then you can easily access the folder if you want to install mods or move the folder to another machine so you don't have to re-download all your Steam stuff on that machine. Steam has done quite a bit to help make things simpler in terms of PC gaming, but forget PCs for a second here. What about these tablets with some of these operating systems like iOS and Android and stuff like that? A lot of these newer OSs are made for simpler devices like tablets. So I'd say that even in terms of gaming simplicity, the ability to just turn on the device and start your game, these alternative devices are inching closer to consoles with simplicity, while consoles are going the other direction. I mean, I talked about my whole experience with PS3, having to sit through giant patch downloads and slow installs relative, compared to installing a PC game, because the hardware in a PS3 is good as of the mid-2000s instead of today. So, there's that. So these two are kind of, in terms of both price and simplicity, the consoles and the alternatives are moving closer together. At some point, they're going to meet, and may the best device win. And I got a feeling that the alternative devices are going to edge them out, and they're going to get squeezed out of existence, both in price and simplicity, by devices that you can use for gaming and something else. So what happens when this soft price cap that is established by consoles being budget gaming devices starts being brought downward by alternative devices becoming more viable? Besides the price and simplicity caps, there's also the concern that consoles and other gaming platforms could plateau out. There's something that's been going on with various types of technology that I've seen over the past 15 years. A lot of technology that was on the rise when I was a little kid started to hit physical limits. Processors hit the physical limits of how many transistors could be on a chip, or heat limits in terms of having to find a way, to get past heat thresholds to continue developing the speed of processors. And now we're starting to get to the point where multimedia-wise, the stuff that's available to the consumer is hitting the physical limits of what our bodies can perceive. I have this discussion all the time. My folks are tossing around the idea of maybe getting a 720p flat screen TV. And I'm like, just get 1080p. Get the best resolution out there and get all the best quality in Blu-rays if you get any. And they're like, oh, what do I need Blu-rays for? We don't have to have our glasses on or to watch TV now. We might not even have our glasses on and not be able to see all the detail. Yeah. Well, it's not just older folks that are having these issues. See, there are certain types of multimedia technologies that are actually about to hit the physical limits of what we can perceive in terms of an experience. Recently in the news, famous id Software developer John Carmack made the point that we shouldn't keep looking for huge graphical updates in the newer consoles because we're getting past that point. And I think he has a point. I mean, we're already at 1080p. So we already have 1080p graphics. Games look great as they are right now. Even if we improve the frame rate, we're going to hit that wall where you can't improve it anymore. If we can get like 1080p, such and such frames per second, we get to that point where our eyes can't perceive any differences. What's going to be the point of improving things after that? See, I think video games might be on their way to hitting the same wall that televisions are already hitting now. If you talk with somebody who does a lot of stuff with televisions, you know, they might mention that 1080p TVs have a threshold where you'll start noticing the improvement over 720p. So you need a certain size TV before 1080p starts to become more worth it than 720p. 1080p TVs, that magic number is about 40 inches. You might be able to notice some of the differences on a 37-inch, but you really need 40 inches at most viewing distances to start seeing the differences versus 720p. You know, I remember when 1080p laptops came out, and I was chuckling at that. I was like, 1080p laptops, what are the pixels the size of a pinprick? I mean, you know, smaller devices with 1080p, you know, do you really want to have to smear your face up against something in order to see all that nice detail in your Blu-ray movies? But yeah, 1080p TVs around the 40-inch mark is when they really start to become noticeably better than 720. Now, 4K TVs are in development, and they've been in the news lately because, companies are working on 4K TVs. Finally, we can have some TVs that are getting up there with the best resolutions of film that have been around for decades. But again, the same thing's happening with 4K TVs. Right now, the magic number with 4K TVs is 50 inches if it doesn't go up anymore. You know, it could be that most viewing distances, you need like a 60-inch TV to notice the improvements over 1080p. On top of that, demand for the already existing resolutions of TVs has started dropping. And so these 4K TVs are going to be more like niche products for people who want a giant screen and don't want to mess with a projector. Here's the thing. I mean, demand for TVs is dropping because most of the folks that were going to make the switch from a tube to a flat panel have done so at this point. So other than gimmick stuff like 3D TVs or maybe a higher refresh rate or something like that, what's the reason other than your old TV breaks for getting a new TV? So yeah, demand for existing resolutions of TVs has started dropping. So this begs the question, how much better can TVs get? And how much better can consoles get? And finally, the most important question of all, what happens when consoles hit that wall where the amount of power you need to have a great looking game at a great frame rate at 1080p or even 4K is basically everywhere, easily affordable and easy to get? What happens then? When consoles hit these legitimate walls in their development because of these market factors, how long will any artificial walls created by the console companies last? And when I say artificial walls, I'm talking about situations where the reason to buy a piece of hardware like a PS3 or an Xbox 360 is largely because of things that don't really need to exist, like exclusive titles and other things like that, or, you know, we'll release it on this platform first and then the other platforms in 6 months, things like that. Now, so people are still talking today about what happened with Sega and the Dreamcast, and some people are even thinking Sega should get back into hardware and make another console for the first time since 1999. But I'm thinking the opposite. I'm thinking maybe what happened with Sega and the Dreamcast is what's eventually going to happen to everybody else. And eventually we may get to the point where you just pick a piece of hardware and then you can just run all kinds of games on it. I mean, how long should, series like Gran Turismo and Ratchet and Clank and Mario and Zelda and Metroid, how much could Nintendo and Sony and all these other companies that make these games, how much money could they make if they released those games on all platforms instead of, having to force people to buy a piece of hardware? And consoles don't really sell at a really high margin to begin with. The thing I keep hearing is that companies take losses on hardware to make up for it on software sales. Why not just get rid of the loss and just sell straight up software? I've got a decent controller. I got a Logitech Rumble Pad on my PC. I'd love to play New Super Mario Brothers on my gaming PC that I maintain so I can do multimedia stuff. You know, I'm sure some people would love to take some of these big screen games and take them on the road with them on a smaller screen to play them on the go. And with me, actually, I'd love to do the reverse. Some of these Nintendo DS remakes of old Final Fantasy games, I'd love to have on my big screen going through my sound system, but there's no real way to do that. There hasn't been a really decent way to put portable games on big screens since the Game Boy player on the Nintendo GameCube. But, yeah. Could making dedicated gaming hardware at all and trying to push hardware simply just get in the way of software sales? You know, I think it could get to the point where every company that makes both hardware and software has their Dreamcast moment and just says, you know what? People can just get their hardware from somewhere else. Let's just heck with it. There's talk of a post-PC era, but what about a post-console era? Because these multifunction portable devices could edge out the reasons to buy a dedicated gaming console too. You know, do we really need to get to the point where Sony's greed is the only reason to buy the latest PlayStation because they refuse to allow for some of the great software titles on the PlayStation, whatever it is by then, to go anywhere else? I mean, at what point does that whole way of doing business become antiquated and out of date? With all these factors to consider, as much as people are declaring doom and gloom for Nintendo, that may prove to be short-sighted when compared with the entire rest of the gaming industry. I blew off getting a PS3 for literally years because I couldn't come up with a really good, and I had to struggle to come up with a reason to justify the expense, even with the PS3 being only $250 instead of $600. Now, there's just not much, and of the multi-platform releases, I'd rather play them on PC, which I can upgrade and get a better experience from later on, than on a console where I'm limited to a certain frame rate, a certain set of hardware, or if there's performance issues like what happened with Skyrim on the PS3, you know, where if your save games get too big, it starts to really bog down the game and stuff like that. You know, why buy it? Why buy a console? It's getting to the point where the reasons to buy gaming hardware are just becoming more dedicated gaming hardware are becoming more and more artificial by the day. So it might sound crazy that the long staple of people's living rooms, the video game console, could be going the way of the dinosaur, but times change and equipment with it, and people's reasons for buying what they buy with it as well. And PC gaming, once joked about as being on its way to being strangled to death in a messy pile of DRM and hardware issues and complexity and expense, that's been, Steam has done quite a bit to cut down on a lot of that and things along those lines. And I've even seen videos on YouTube from folks like Review Tech USA, people talking about how they used to love consoles more than PCs, but they've really warmed up to PC gaming thanks to all these kinds of advances. But I'm not even going to pretend that PC gaming isn't in the same boat. I think really the whole software hardware thing and the bundling that goes on right now is probably what's about to, become a real dinosaur. Not when other companies besides Sega finally have their Dreamcast moment and realize there's probably more money to be made in selling great games and software across all available platforms than continuing to make hardware. So, some people are saying Nintendo should do that. I think everybody should do that. Because we got so many devices out there nowadays that can play all kinds of video games. And gamers have interest in all kinds of games besides the latest titles. Some people want what's new. Some people want to, replay older games. Some people want to see re-releases like the HD remakes that we've been seeing on things like the PlayStation Network and whatnot. Like the Beyond Good and Evil remake that I'm playing, or the GoldenEye HD one that's out. I might check that out too. I even heard rumors there might be a PC version of GoldenEye Reloaded, which is why I haven't bought the game, because any multi-platforms I play, I want to play the PC version. And then the PS3 is largely for stuff that I can't play on PC, and likewise with Wii being the Mario box. And the Wii U is probably going to be a Mario box too, at the rate Nintendo's going. Anyways, we're just at about the half-hour mark for this discussion, but it sounds crazy that anyone could be thinking that console gaming could go away sometime in the next 10 to 15 years. But when you stop and think about it, the idea just isn't all that crazy, is it? It really could happen. Certainly we've got the technology for it, the market for it, and the kind of economic environment where people want to get the most they can out of whatever they drop their hard-earned money on. We've got that stuff going on too, but it's definitely something worth thinking about. In the meantime, whatever you play your games on right now, have fun, game on, have a blast. This hobby is certainly not going anywhere. And yeah, have fun, folks. Till next time. It's time to wrap this show up. Until next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by.
MultimediaJay.